Good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. In this episode, we're going to talk about nuclear war. We're going to talk about continuity of governments. And is it even possible, with today's technology, to have continuity of government? And here on my map, on the Google Earth, is the Raven Rock Mountain Complex. This was built in the early 50s. And this impressive site was built really before you had GPS and GLONASS guided ballistic missiles that could target very, very precise areas on the planet with tremendous accuracy. In the 1950s and the 1960s, when this is an underground continuity of government complex. When this site was built, 1960, 1970, going into the 1980s, the Russians, the Soviet Union, did not really have the capability of targeting this complex. They could get close to it, but there was the possibility that obviously it would be protected from a near miss. So let's have a look at this facility real quick, and then we'll talk about what do governments do now in case of World War III, which I say right now is more likely than at any time in world's history. Even going back to the Bay of Pigs, I think we're in a situation right now that we are at incredibly great risk of a possible nuclear exchange at some point, and it's increasing day by day. So you look at Raven Rock, and you can see the access points here. So this is one access area, and the whole concept behind the build of this facility, if you go over to this area here, you'll see another series of access points. So here and here. And the reason this is built this way, where you see the entry point here and here, is the concept is basically there is a series of tunnels that connect. We'll call this point A, and this will be point B over here. So you have a tunnel or two tunnels that access point A to point B. And then somewhere in the middle of this tunnel that runs between point A and point B is another tunnel that leads off this main tunnel. And this is where the complex is, over in this area here. So the concept is that, let's say if there's a nuclear attack on Raven Rock, and for some reason there's a nuclear detonation over in this area, or even close to the entry point, the idea is that the blast wave will proceed down the tunnel and will be contained to the main tunnel and not enter the main complex, which is in all probability someplace over in this area. And this is an expansive complex. They've basically hollowed out the entire mountain and have put in large three-story buildings that would house the President of the United States, other key leadership figures. And again, it's a very, very large complex. At the time, again, designed to keep a large number of U.S. government officials safe. Now, is the Raven Rock complex safe in the modern era? No, it's not. The Russians, the Chinese, early in a nuclear exchange, before we would start shooting down GLONASS and started shooting down GPS satellites, they would have that capability of targeting this mountain very precisely. And if this mountain were to be hit by multiple 1 megaton, 2 megaton, 3 megaton warheads, even probably 500 kilotons, risk a direct hit on the mountain, risk collapsing the interior structure of the mountain and thereby killing its occupants. But at the time when these facilities were built, the idea that they would be hidden from the view of the Soviet Union was one of its key defensive principles, meaning if you didn't know where it was and you didn't see it, how would you target it? And then if you did try to target it, the accuracy of those nuclear weapons back in the 60s and 70s were of such that there was a high probability that it would miss the target. So people living in major cities and large military bases obviously would suffer the brunt of any sort of nuclear exchange. But not in today's world. In today's world, these continuity of government sites, Raven Rock, Cheyenne Mountain, and a host of others that have been created, in all probability, in the early stages of a nuclear exchange, these sites would be essentially destroyed. You would see multiple 1 megaton hits on these sites, thereby making them really obsolete. So how does a nation state maintain continuity of government? Well, it has to be done on a much smaller scale. The only real way you can protect key government leaders is by having a site that is very well hidden, that the opposing force would not expend a nuclear attack on a site that they were unsure of that would house governmental leaders. So what does that look like? What does that look like in today's world? How do you keep a continuity of government? So as opposed to thinking big, thinking large tunnels underground, under mountains that can be identified via satellites, be identified by Google Earth, think of smaller structures, smaller houses that are really in the middle of nowhere, that have deep underground, basically essentially bunkers, multiple sub-basements under said house. So if you build a house, an individual residence, it's much easier to hide what you are doing. If you are going to make a house with a small bunker complex under it, it's much easier to hide that, a single house, solitary house sitting someplace in the forest, in the mountains somewhere, than you would hiding the Raven Rock mountain complex, which obviously is a whole nother story unto its own. Very large facility. Now, do we know for a fact that governments, both in Russia, China, the United States, are building those types of sites, those smaller individual bunkers attached to probably large opulent homes? Probably. I think at this point that's really the only way to adequately protect a world leader. Again, these large complexes are going to be targeted very early on in any sort of nuclear exchange. And these governments know that. They know Raven Rock is probably not safe unless the country that is initiating hostilities would have the capability of taking down either the GPS or GLONASS system that has the ability to precisely assist in the targeting of those intercontinental ballistic missiles. Once you eliminate the GPS receiver, some of those systems become much less accurate. or not as accurate, and then thus the possibility that you would see a survival of those inside the Raven Rock Mountain complex would increase. That's why I believe that if we were to see a nuclear exchange, you would see very, very quickly both sides attempting to shoot down the GPS systems of the opposing nation state to reduce the accuracy of its ballistic missile capabilities, sub-launch ballistic missile capabilities. That would be the goal. And then ultimately, a lot of these world leaders, like the President of the United States, senior members of the Senate, Congress, senior military leaders, they would probably leave very important targets, and they would end up in these essentially individual single-family homes in mountains that has a bunker underneath of it. Now, there would be hardwired, obviously, communications where they could direct ongoing hostilities. But the idea that you could protect a key military leader in a large complex like Raven Rock or a bunker under the Pentagon is just not going to happen in today's world. Again, unless one side takes down that GPS system first. And that's what leads to, I believe, we would see it would be a very quick escalation of hostilities, because both sides would want to get off its most accurate missiles against the opposing side. They would want to take down those key leadership targets in the opposing nation state. So again, just wanted to, many of you have probably not seen the Raven Rock complex. Most people don't even know the Raven Rock complex exists. But nonetheless, there it is, just north of the border of Maryland in Pennsylvania. Obviously, you can't, if you were to do a street view. Why isn't the street view working? Interesting. Oh, here, I know why. Duh. Let's go back, and we'll try to get you as close to a street view where you can see the entry point of Raven Rock. Let's go over here. Look at this point. See if you can see the entrance. Here's one. And yeah, you can't really see much. But you go around this bend and you have the entrance, and obviously a very forested area. And then let's get out of ground view here. And then we'll go over and we'll look at the other entry point, where you, the viewer, can see exactly what I'm talking about. And this is over here. Hopefully I didn't do the same one. And I did. I did the exact same one. My apologies. And you can see the entry gate here. And then if you come over to this area, I think you have a better view of the actual entry point. Maybe. And there's homes backed right up to this facility. Look at this. How would you like to live where this guy's at? And then finally, you can see exactly where the entry point to Raven Rock is. Multiple concertina wire around the facility. Double fences that goes entirely around the mountain. And homes backed right up to it. So anyway, thought that would be interesting to look at and have a view of where your leaders will go in case of nuclear war and try to be safe. But I don't think so. I don't think they'd be safe here anymore. I think they would. I think they'd be crushed, and thus there are other sites now that have been built, more remote sites that would keep them safer. Have a good day, everybody.